Hey, VOLKO.
Hi, Dan.
Thanks for doing this, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and excuse me, I might be a little bit loopy. I just got my second COVID shot, so
Way to go!
Yeah, I know,
All
but I didn't fare well with the first one, so
okay.
I'm expected not to do well on this one.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, good luck.
Okay, well, thank you. You know what?
Don't medicate too early because you can dampen the immune response.
I don't understand that, but anyways, we'll go on.
All right. Yeah. Don't take your Tylenol before you really need to.
Actually, she told me to take the Tylenol.
Yeah, it's gonna, you get fewer antibodies possibly. So I mean, hold out until you need it. When you need it, take it. But don't pre-medicate.
Oh man, I thought you were talking about because weed is legal here and alcohol. That's what I thought you were talking about.
No. I'm saying you want to get your body excited and your immune system excited to produce those antibodies. And if you take your dampening, that's what they told me. Yeah, you take it too soon, too many, hours matter right now because this is your body deciding what to do.
Yeah, verstehen Sie. Yeah, I understand 100%. And you know what? I'm actually going to listen to you. So you know what, VOLKO? Can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm VOLKO. I am Dan's buddy south of the border. All that barbed wire you saw in the intro, that's like the defenses to keep people like me from coming into his country. So I'm down here, and I'm a retired United States Fed, and now I play board games about history, and I design them also.
So United States Fed. So feds are civilians, and they're not military. Is that right?
Well, I mean, I guess the military is also federal, but I was in the civil service, right? So I was a GS whatever, GS 14, GS 15, government service. So I was a civilian government employee, government careerist.
So any CIA agents non-civilian?
Well, not in that capacity. They're in that capacity. So this is a civilian agency, right? So in that capacity, they're civilians. Now, you could have, retired military. You could have military officers who are on rotation, that kind of thing. But if you're an agency careerist, you're in the civil service.
Okay. So you are VOLKO Runke. You forgot to mention your last name.
Yeah. Runke
comes from where? Where is your blood?
Germany. So yeah, Runke is not that uncommon.
Okay.
And it's both my parents' families were German. My father's family was in East Prussia before the war, and so that's Runke. And then my mother's family was in Pomerania, but her parents emigrated actually in the 1920s, and she was born and grew up in South America.
Oh, okay. Well, that's weird. South America, you being German, but let's not go there.
Yeah, but I mean, 1920s. So my grandfather on that side and his brothers were all officers in the Imperial German Army.
Wow. In the Prussian army or in the German army? The
German army. Well, because Prussia and other German states became the German Empire in 1871, right? So this is the World War I, the 19-teens. So it's the Imperial German Army. Wilhelm II is the Kaiser of Germany, not Prussia. Not Prussia. Prussia's a state within Germany, but it's the German Empire.
So did you ever do a family tree going back to any Prussian military people you had in your blood?
No, and I don't know. I mean, the family. So I know my great grandfathers who were enlisted on my dad's side, and on my mother's side we had the officers and my grandfathers. But going, I don't know, back to 18. There are family trees. I just don't know I don't know their stories. I don't know that they were military or not going back into Prussia.
Well, that's pretty, I guess you're good pedigree, eh?
Well, I got peasants on one side and landholders on the other. So I guess that's a good, diverse mix.
I don't want to toot my own horn, but we were the king's fools. So
King's Fools.
yeah, we were.
What's that?
We were jesters, man.
Oh, is that right? You had like a line of jesters. Wow.
Cards, man. You're damn right. Wow.
Nice.
Yeah,
Well,
that's right.
and I mean, you're kind of carrying on the tradition of as an entertainer, aren't you? That's
Thank
awesome.
you very much.
Yeah, music and video and everything. There you have it.
I could be a geisha.
It's in your blood.
I'm telling you, man.
You-
And you know what? If someone's going to ask me, who are you? Me? I would say, I'm a fool, proudly.
Fool with an E on the end, that kind of thing. But I don't know if you would succeed as a geisha. I'm going to have to break that to you. I'm not so sure. Look,
Makeup is everything. So, VOLKO, I'm going to ask you all these boring questions, you know, like war games, okay? I'm just, well, no, not even war games. What was your first game?
Oh, my first game? Any
Yes,
game?
sir.
Wow. I can tell you my first war game, my first any game.
No, yeah, not war game. Your first game, unless it's a war game.
No, there was probably stuff before that. Boy, it's hard to remember. I had all the, probably we played, German board games in the household. So we had one that was essentially like Trouble. You remember Trouble with the Pop-O-Matic thing in the middle?
Too loud, tack, 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 tack.
Yeah, that thing. Okay. So we had it was a German board game and it was the same thing. It just didn't have it was just with wooden pieces and you'd go around. That was one. There was, I think it's called in English, Nine Men's Morris, Mühle in German that my dad taught me. That was an early one. He taught me chess pretty early. We played a game called Panama Poker, which was a little bit like poker, but you'd roll dice and bet. That was an early one. Those are some of I don't know which was my first, but those are all ones in my early pre-war game memory.
And so I guess you like games, right? That was a family thing. You guys like games and you enjoyed what? What did you enjoy of the game?
Oh, I don't know. It's play and strategy and that kind of thing. This was all before war games, which I think I enjoy somewhat in that way, but it's not mainly about the strategy for me. It's more about the history.
So who hit you on the head and you went to war games?
It's seeing them in the store, because they used to, when it was the early 70s was when I first got in, and the Avalon Hill games were in a regular toy store.
I know.
You couldn't imagine it now.
No.
So I would see them. I would see them. And so that kind of looks cool. And I was visiting, I was in 5th grade, I think. Yeah, 5th grade. I'm visiting a friend's house and he had a copy of Panzerblitz. Just randomly, somebody had given it to him. He had no interest in it, But I kind of pulled it apart because it looked interesting. And what I liked about it was the geomorphic boards, right? These 3 boards you could fit together anyway to make a different terrain configuration. All the roads would match up and the rivers would match up. Anyway, that was just kind of cool little thing. And I was like, this is really cool. What's this? And he was just like, oh, it's some complicated stuff. And we didn't play it. But that was like, okay, this looks really interesting. I want to find out what this is. And so eventually, scraped together the quarters and bought a copy of Avalon Hill's France 1940, and that was it.
So, I mean, was it the strategy? Was it the CRT that got you into that? Was it the complexity of a new system, of new systems that got you into war games?
I think it was the historical story, and the adventure, and how the game showed me and told me things about what was happening in this battle, right? This kind of adventure story or whatever, this historical battle. And I could see it all and reenact it all happening on the board. And that was 6th grade. And I was starting to play these games with my friend. And right away in 6th grade, I did a big report for 6th grade, like paper, history paper. And it was all built around what I had learned from France 1940. And maybe I got a couple of other books or something. But it was basically, I'm learning about that story of how this campaign worked and what the, advantages of the Germans were and what the Allies did wrong and, why it was surprising and what the Maginot Line was and all that kind of stuff. It was just very powerful to show me all that through the game compared to, reading a book.
Yeah, and it's funny because you said German first, okay? You being German. Now, I know that artistically wise, I don't want to say Nazi sells, but the whole aura of the dress, the whole thing, it's like really cool. Now, you being German, and this is quite personal question, VOLKO, you don't have to answer it or not.
Right.
Were you attracted by that because your ancestry is German?
So I was interested in that in part because my ancestry was German, because I was also growing up on all the family stories. Most of my family was still in Germany.
Wow.
My mother's family they were German in South America. Well, they had gone back to Germany by that time. And my father was the first, and all of that family on both sides was the first to then emigrate to the United States. And my mother and he, you know, together here, we were like the diaspora of the family. Everybody else was back in Germany. Now, subsequently, others also emigrated. But it meant I was back in Germany for Christmases, for summers, very often.
So
that family was here.
You were born in Germany, is that
I
right?
was born here. No, I was born in the United States.
Okay.
I was born in the United States, but I visited there very often. Those relatives visited us here. And so I got all the stories growing up from my grandmother and from my parents, especially of my father and his family's experience in Germany after World War II, right? So my father at the end of World War II is 14 years old. And they're refugees from the East. I mean, they were in East Prussia, right? They're running ahead. They barely escaped the Red Army coming across Poland. And then they're in a very, they're in a very bad situation socially as DPs in Bavaria. And of course, post-war, everything was tough for the Germans. I mean, it was, food rationing, all of that.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So, hi Jay, that's really cool. Yeah, so of course I'm very interested in that. It's part of the reason why Nevsky was a recent candidate, was because I'm very interested, of course, in that Baltic region of the world. Anyway, so my knowledge of the war was mainly from the German point of view as defeated and endangered civilians, and then coping with the difficulty of that situation afterwards, because that's what my father's formative time. And for my grandmother, having 4 children, my grandfather's drafted, he's off in the army. He's a POW in France 2 years after the war. So it was a very, difficult situation they came through. And that was very formative for me in comparing the good fortune of my time and my life and my country, not having had to go through that.
Oh my God.
Right. But it also, it just fed my fascination with it, with war in general.
I think it's fascinating. Yeah,
with war in general, and certainly with World War II in particular, and the German experience within World War II. Absolutely. In the sense of how do these things come about, and it's sort of it's like among the ultimate stressful situations, right? And it just fascinated me. What is it like to go through that? And that feeds the interest in the historical war games, of course.
Yes, of course. And I mean, I to be a German in Germany in 46 must have been hell. Must have been hell.
So and the situation is for my father's family, and of course his father was still off in French POW camp, right? So it's really his mom and his 3 brothers, and they're East Prussians, so they're Prussians. We talked about Prussia before, right? Before they're in Bavaria. The Bavarians generally did not like the Prussians, so that's already a con. So, but they weren't just in Bavaria; they were actually in a valley at the southern end of a region called the Allgäu. They're in a valley, Kleinbalsatal. At the end of the valley, which like dead ends in the Alps, it doesn't go anywhere, is a little piece of Austria. Okay, that's like a dead end, like a little Austrian enclave. So they were in that part of this valley. So they're in Austria next door to the Bavarians, and they're under occupation by the French. Okay, now there's a pecking order there, right? The French are at the top. Now French, and it was French, it was like French Moroccans with sheep flocks and so anyways, they're at the top. Then the Austrians, because the Austrians at that point, their view was, well, we were victims of the Germans. The German Nazis came and took us over. We're on the winning side. That was the kind of the Austrian local idea.
And speaking German saying that, yeah.
Well, yeah, and so you can question whether that was fair or not, but they're like, and then so they're lording that over the Bavarians next door, who are on the losing side. And then beneath that, but the Bavarians at least lived there. And then you've got the Prussians, who are refugees from the East. And there's no love lost between the Bavarians and the Prussians. So you can see my dad is like at the way, way bottom of this social pecking order. And this is in a time when you had to have, you had a certain amount of ration coupons or something just to eat. Like eating was a big deal. And so one story, for example, so my dad happened to be, you can kind of tell I'm kind of a skinny guy, right? So my dad was like really skinny guy. As a kid, he was so skinny that the family always sent him to go get the ration coupons because it looked like he was like starving, and maybe he'd get a few extra, That's the situation there.
Bloody hell, VOLKO. Everybody's got a story. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Now,
yeah, that's just one. I mean, they almost got overrun by the Red Army going across Poland. They had to, it was, they were lucky to have made it there. They were passing through Dresden as refugees when, the Allies firebombed it. So my dad had that experience of being, bombed in World War II as a kid, right?
Your dad is still alive?
No, he passed away in 2019.
Right, I remember. I'm sorry, VOLKO.
That's right. No, but he ended up having a wonderful life in the United States, and he was, he and his brother were adventurous and ambitious, and they got their education. With all that, they got their education in Germany, and they emigrated, and I think he had a very joyful life here in the United States. Naturalized as a citizen, federal service, scientist, PhD scientist. And so it was a very, I think a very happy life. But of course, what we're growing up with is the idea of how difficult it was, and especially how damaging that war was to us as people.
Yeah. You don't want to relay these stories somehow, written word, game, because you're going way back. You're going you're going Nevsky back, okay? And Almoravid, are you going further? I don't know my history. Are you going further than Nevsky now? Yes, you are.
Well, we've already, so with my son, I did Falling Sky. That's Caesar. So that's even further back. And the idea is there. I mean, of course, I'm still interested in World War II in Europe, However, I like to travel around. And after a while, it's kind of like, well, what else is going on, right? And it's the comparative aspect that's interesting to me. How is World War I different? Very. How is warfare before the industrial age? How does it compare to very recent? So I've done everything from, a distant play in Afghanistan, 2001 to 2013, all right, all the way back to Caesar. And so Nevsky comes from the idea, medieval operational warfare, it comes from the idea that there are gaps in what the hobby covers thoroughly. And there's not nearly as much attention to medieval warfare, particularly at the operational level, as there is to other things. So that's why I'm going back there.
Hold on a second. Now, you said there are no games in that era. Do you feel a need to create those games to educate the people in that era, or is it just really an interest you have?
Well, I think it's more the latter. And not no games, underrepresented. It's not that there are no games, there are. It's just compare that to the amount of games on World War II Eastern Front. right? There's no comparison. So it's like this. Okay, so there's a lot more to be explored and said and stories to be told, if you will. And I do it. Why do I do it? This is not my career, right? I don't make a living doing the game. It's for my own entertainment.
I got it.
Number one. So I'm interested in exploring it. So just like exploring France 1940 through that game, I got to a point in the hobby, in my like hobby career, if you will, where it's like, you know, I think I could make a decent game myself, or maybe a better game than what's already out there. And that's, I mean, if you want to learn about a campaign, you want to learn about the dynamics of a war, you know, make a game on it, because it is not just researching to be able to tell a story of what happened. You have to build a model that works, that produces historical results, and you find out what you had wrong in your head, or what you hadn't even thought about, because you see it operating on the table. And if it doesn't fit together, and if it doesn't answer all the questions you need to answer, it will not play. It will not produce historical results, right? So just like it's very powerful to learn about a historical process by playing a game about it, a dynamic model, a model in motion, it's even more powerful if you need to build that model in the first place, right? And so for me, yes, I want to learn about warfare in the area near where my dad grew up, but warfare in the Middle Ages. What better way to learn about that than to design a game like Nevsky?
Now, VOLKO, where do you get the skill, the historical knowledge, especially the skill and the mechanics to bring out the story you want to bring out in a game that takes you 2 years or 3 years to do? That's insane. How does that, like, how can you not revise? It makes me think of Shelby Foote when he did his, you wanted to do a 200-page Civil War thing. It took him 10 years to do it because, man, there's new things all the time. So how does that happen in 3 years? And where do you get your skill?
So there's two different parts of that, right? The skill and the historical knowledge. So the design skill, right? How do you translate? How do you represent historical relationships and processes in board game mechanics, right? That's a pretty unique thing. And that comes from playing a lot of games. And I think that's true for all successful designers. They've played a lot of games of how other people have done that, how other people have represented whatever they're simulating, those processes, warfare, in board games with mechanics, right? And that, having played all those other games and thought about them and maybe critiqued them and said, well, I like this part of it, but this part I could do better in a different way, and tinkered and that kind of thing. Because I tinkered with games a long time before I did one that I said, okay, here's a new game by me that's, you know, original enough to be published. And that gives you as a designer a toolbox of lots of different ways of doing things. And then you're studying some historical process, a war, and you're like, okay, well, here's kind of how I think it worked. I have this idea in my head, a mental model of how it worked, how it ran as a machine. And now I want to represent that. Well, how do I do that? I'm reaching in that toolbox and saying, well, there's like this kind of way that was done in this game and that in this game. And I'm going to take those two things that pre-existed, somebody else's ideas, mechanics, game mechanics, but I want to fit them together in this new way to do this new thing to represent this historical dynamic, right? That's what's happening, right? That's the design innovation. Nevsky is a great example. The command cards in Nevsky are taken from the column cards in the game Angola. Ragnar Brothers and lately MMP Angola. Totally different topic, but with a similar purpose. And there's no way I would have come up with the command cards in Nevsky if I had not played and loved and studied and critiqued Angola, a game by somebody else about a different topic. So that's where that comes from. Just doing that because I've been playing these games since the early 1970s. So I have a good toolbox, right? Now, on the historical side, that in most cases is a lot of reading and watching some shows too. But, you know, I have a pile of books about insurgency in Colombia. I have a pile of books relating to warfare on the Baltic frontier in the Middle Ages, and so on. And then a very important ingredient of that is collaboration. And so what happens now is I start talking about the game and showing pieces of it online mainly. And now it's not just, you know, as Woodrow Wilson put it, I'm not just using the brains I have, I'm using all the brains I can borrow as well. And all that free expertise comes in to make the history that much more authentic, accurate, rich, and detailed, because now I can get help about medieval Russia from Russians or Balts who read Russian and happen to be enthusiastic about the history of medieval warfare. You know, that's now available to me on the internet. So it gets better. And in that sense, Almoravid, I think, is actually on a far sounder historical basis than is Nevsky. Because when I started Nevsky, I was just kind of on my own, you know.
Okay.
It took a while. And by the time I got help like that, some things were already committed, or maybe my mind was already set. I had my certain model that I wasn't ready to depart from. And so maybe Nevsky is a little more controversial in the history, possibly. I haven't gotten a lot of pushback on that, but it's just my own sense. Almoravid, from the beginning, I had Albert Alegrejove, who's a war gamer who lives in Barcelona, has access not just to Spanish language books about it, but actual Spanish historians, expert on it, right? And others on that, as that team build, that make sure from the beginning, from the get-go, that the Spanish history in the game is sound and rich. Now, even then, there's a big gap there, because I did not have access at that time that I was doing Almoravid. I had lots of access to Spanish wargamers. I had very, very little, not no, but very, very little access to Arab wargamers who could verify, validate, and enrich the history on the Muslim side of the story, because Almoravid is about Christians and Muslims fighting each other and amongst themselves in 11th century, what is now Spain, but 11th century Hispania. And so I did the best I could with the people I could get access to, but in some cases, others who know something about that from sources in Arabic, okay, came out later, but they're coming out, you know, I couldn't find them until later. And so it's a little bit too late once you get into art to, you know, say, okay, we're going to go back and change how this, you know, all these materials and how
too much work done. Yeah.
Right. And so, but nevertheless, that's the model I'm really attracted to now, is that because of the reach that we can have now through the internet, of course, and the fact that the hobby is international, that there's enough people interested in this to do it for the same reason I do it, just for joy of design and for getting things right in your hobby. And so volume 3 in that same series, Inferno, is medieval Italy. The original design is by a veteran Italian wargamer, an expert on all kinds of things, Italian military history, Enrico Acerbi.
Yeah.
Okay. And other Italian wargamers, and others too, or other European or US wargamers who have the Italian language, and we're doing the playtest of that essentially publicly. Right. It used to be, you know, you do your design, you would wait, get all your ducks in a row before it was really ready for prime time. And then you'd show it to somebody, but then you're already committed to a lot of things because it's all interlocking part. Anything you change and the ripple effects everywhere. Right. So now all of that process is playing out on Discord, on social media server that serves gaming. And we have a Discord server for the whole series, Levian Campaign series. That's where I'm play testing and developing Inferno with anybody who's interested in helping out testing and inputting. It's all, you know, accessible. So I can draw on all of that diverse knowledge and judgment in improving the design. And we also have something like 10 other, I haven't counted them, designs in the series in work by enthusiasts like me. And we're just kind of all doing it together.
Inferno, why? Because of Dante?
There you go. So Dante was Florence, it's Florence versus Siena, Guelphs and Ghibellines. And Dante was writing in the aftermath of that campaign from the Guelph Florentine side. And so Enrico thought that would be a good title for the game.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, I got it right away. Right away. Italy, Inferno, at that time, Dante. But anyways, that's because I'm smart, VOLKO. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're an educated man, Dan.
Thanks. You flatter me. I forgot what I was going to ask. Now, because of your new knowledge of your old games, will there be remixes?
Right. Well, this is what you're saying, like about Shelby Foote, right?
Right.
And, and I think this was Mark Herman, but somebody said something that I quote all the time about games. And it's the phrase, never finished, only published.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's very much my life, because we can't really, in the period of time of development, like you said, 3 years or whatever, in the period of time that you have energy on a project and that you're trying to get it to market, you cannot play test adequately. You just can't. I mean, it's volunteer labor. Every experiment you do, and that's what a play test is, an experiment, right? You then make adjustments, but every adjustment has ripple effects, and you're trying to account for those. And so it's never the same design that's being tested enough times, more than once or twice, because you've already changed something. So all the past experiments are somewhat invalidated because it's now a different design, because you're developing it. And you'd like to do, like with a, let's say a computational model, you can do thousands of tests, right? No problem. Mm-hmm. We can't do thousands of tests. But every time, player strategy, some rules mistakes, whatever we've changed, and of course chance affects the outcome, and it's a complex system. So the effects are nonlinear. The outcomes are changed a lot by each of those variables, and we can't test for all those variables every time. There's no way. So it's not possible unless you automate parts or the whole thing. It's not possible sufficiently to play test a manual war game. So when it goes to the market, you've had, you're lucky. Let's say you've attracted a lot of attention as a designer, and you actually have, let's say, a couple dozen play testers, right? That would be an embarrassment of riches. That's a lot of people giving you volunteer time. And maybe altogether you've done something like 100 tests of the game. But now, if the game is a success, you're going to have 1,000 people or thousands play it each several times. Now you're going to have thousands, right? Potentially much richer number of experiments. Of course, you're going to discover stuff that doesn't work as well as you wanted it to. Of course, after it's printed and shipped out and everybody has a thing, you're going to want to change stuff, right? If you care. I mean, unless you're Mozart and you just do it like perfect the first time. And who's that? Not me.
Only one person.
Yeah. You're going to want to rewrite some notes. And so it's definitely that way with Nevsky. And I'm just, even this morning, I was testing out, again, online, openly, right, in the Discord server, but testing out with one of the play testers. We're each doing solitaires of one of the scenarios that I think doesn't work the way it's written in the box. I just think it's unbalanced. A fix to that we're using in an online tournament that's going on right now of Nevsky, because I want to fix it. So I'm interested. I want to, and to some degree with the internet, fortunately, I can disseminate that. I can say, okay, you have what's in the box that you paid for. Here, make a few pencil strokes in the booklet, and this will work better. Why not put that out there? I mean, some people say, well, why are you changing it? Does that mean I bought a defective product? That's inherent in our hobby in board war games.
So VOLKO, how do you?
Here's a way you can make it at least better.
Well, so how do you answer such an ignorant question?
Well,
I'm just saying ignorant, not knowing the full impact of that question. I don't mean to belittle anybody. I'm just saying, man, you know?
Well, I mean, I think the answer is we're going to be candid about what it is. We'd rather be candid. Here's why we didn't realize it at the time, briefly, you know, and here's how this improves it. And we're not trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. We're trying to say, okay, here, you get what you get. By the way, we're not saying, if we say, okay, you can improve this scenario, we're not saying that the product does not work.
It's a variant.
Right? Look at all the people out there playing it and enjoying it. The product works. It's enjoyable. You know, you will get your money's worth. But if you're interested, for free, here's a way to make it a little bit better. That's the answer. And if you're unhappy with that, then don't buy it.
And with all that being said, there's no way you're going to do a remix, because it's the same thing when you do the remix. When you do, it's the same thing. You're an artist and you will never be satisfied. And obviously with history, and you want it to be so precise, how can you be satisfied?
But then there's an interesting juncture. Now let's say it's really successful. The first print run sells out, and it's successful enough that there's still market for it, even though the company sold all the copies it had. The company figures we can still sell enough more of these that we're going to do a second printing. Okay. Okay. So that's really good news. Yeah. Okay. Now you've got the first printing out there. Everybody's got that game. They're playing it. They've paid for it. They're hopefully enjoying it. And now comes the opportunity to change it in a second printing. Now it gets complicated, because you might think, well, we have improvements.
Okay.
We can correct mistakes. We can make it better based on our experience. So why don't we just change what we need to change, and we put out not just a second printing, but a second edition.
Right.
A new version of the thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay. But now how do you feel if you bought the first one?
Okay. But what concern is that of yours, the marketing process? You are a designer, you design.
What do you mean?
I mean, why are you thinking marketing-wise, like, oh, poor guy, he bought the first edition, now I'm going to put out the second edition, poor guy? But that's not your role. Your role is to design the game. Because you're thinking marketing. That I'm trying to. Am I misunderstood?
So the great scholar of war games, Peter Perla, in an article that he wrote called "Why Wargaming Works." And he does professional wargaming principally, but he's also a hobby wargamer and writes about both. And one thing he says in there is war game design is communication.
Okay.
Fundamentally, yes, the spur for me to do it is my own interest in learning about something. Mm-hmm. Absolutely true. But if I'm going to take that somewhere, and it's much more interesting if I'm experiencing that with other people, right? I'm doing a design to communicate to you, the player, my idea, my model of how warfare worked, right? And so that's my role. It's my communication and the communication that comes back to me between me, the designer, and people who play that design and experience it, reflect on it, enjoy it or not, critique it, improve the model, because every model can be improved by somebody else coming at it from a different cognition, right? And so those are the people I'm most interested in. The people who have said, yeah, Nevsky sounds interesting enough for me to buy it and spend my free time playing it. Those are the most interesting people. That's my most interesting interlocutors in the whole experience. Of course I care about what they think about what happens next to the game. Oh. So I saw, like Carl wrote, you know, you hate it mm-hmm. when you got something and then a second edition comes out and it's different. And now what do you do? And so there are some ideas that companies have, like their update kits, which mm-hmm. if they're small enough, they might make available free to past purchasers. If they're not cheap enough to do that commercially for the company, there might be at least an update kit, and we've done that. So we decided to do that with, for example, Fire in the Lake with Mark Herman and I. for exactly the same reason. Afterward, we realized certain things, little things that were out of balance. We wanted to change a few cards, that sort of thing. From the experiences, enough people had played Fire in the Lake. It was popular enough that we had that data. And now we have the opportunity to make it better. So we said, okay, we're going to do a second edition. It will be better. The first edition still works. It's just we think the second edition works better. And if you're interested enough, you've bought the first edition, here's an update kit that you don't have to pay for the whole package, right? You know, anyway, so it's tricky. So with Nevsky, I hope one day to have that opportunity. And I'm already preparing now and thinking all the time, what would I change? But the threshold, because of this problem of first edition, second edition, and the constituents who've bought that first edition, the threshold for changing anything is higher, right? Yes. I don't want to be trivial about, I don't want to say, well, we're reprinting the whole card deck just to change a few commas.
Yeah, or colors, or whatever, yeah.
It's got, so I'm trying to zero in, what are the key things that have the biggest impact in improving the game, but will be the least or the easiest to update the existing sets, right? Or to at least make the second edition the most justified. It's a balancing act that's tricky.
It's funny, VOLKO, there's a reluctance in you to make a second edition. You're sheepish when you say it because you're thinking of the money of the people. You're thinking of the free time of the people. But you're an artist, VOLKO. Your thing is to design. Let Gene worry about that type thing. You understand?
Well, but Gene and I are working together. You know, I mean, we're working. You
have to make friends with Gene.
We're like a team, right?
You have to make friends with Gene. You don't make friends with the people you work with, man.
Oh, of course. Oh, Gene and I are great friends.
There's a problem. But anyways, I'm being facetious.
Yeah. And I don't want to say I'm too sheepish. I'm actually eager to do second edition, but what I'm sheepish about is doing it frivolously. And
well, you're not going to do it frivolously.
I'm not going to do
it frivolously.
And I'm not going to do it frivolously. And I'm certainly not. I mean, one thing I've never done is a third edition, you know, where we're like, oh, you know, we had our second edition and we did all that. And now we're going to keep changing stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like I go back to like the ASL. I mean, when with Advanced Squad, I played Squad Leader from the first, you know, Cross of Iron wasn't even out yet. I was playing Squad Leader in the 1977, right? But once they said, okay, we're going to give you this big loose leaf binder so you can switch out your rules pages, you know, because we're already I mean, it's like, it's too much for me. You know, it's too much for me. So I don't want it to be like that. So if we do additional printings, you know, I kind of feel like I had my shot at it. If I've had thousands of people playing it and now I've taken that in and I've done the best I can in a second edition to account for all that experience, we're done.
Yeah, and it's a good feeling. And again, the second edition dilemma. How do you say? I want it. I welcome it because man, it's new information. But yeah, I guess on the Gene side, cost right away. Cost. So he puts out little pamphlets, or man, if it's too much, you put it out on BGG and we parlo. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think Gene thinks about all these things too, and he's a businessman. And he's thinking about the customers and the fans. Mm-hmm. And if it's something like, well, all we really need to do here is correct the wording on some rules, and we put in a living rules PDF on the website for you to make it easier for you to either you can print that out or you can just mark it in pencil in your rule set. Mm-hmm. Then we're not going to sell you an upgrade kit.
I understand.
A rule book, you know. But if we really do have to reprint a bunch of the cards, playing cards, but you can't just go in and that's a pain in the butt. If you've got things that don't work right on enamel or whatever, laminated playing cards, you're just going to have to reproduce them. And if there's too much of that, it's just not economically feasible for the company to just, there's one thing between if it's errata, if it's okay, we really thought this worked when we printed the thing, but it doesn't. It doesn't work. You can't really play the game as intended. or something went awry in the art, in the printing, whatever. These cards were misprinted. We gave you 3 sets of these and it's missing those. That's an errata. That's a fix-it kit.
I got you.
There you'll find GMT is going to say, okay, we just have to eat that. We're going to have to pay that cost, and we're going to send this fix-it kit out to everybody who bought the game to make it work as intended. That's one thing. That's a wrap.
Much appreciated.
I'm talking about the fact that the thing works, and it's printed the way we wanted, and you will play it the way we played it and loved it when we printed it. But now we know more, and we know we can tighten this bolt and lengthen this strut over here, and it'll run even smoother. That's not errata. That's development.
Yes.
And because of the nature thing, never finished, only published, after you publish it, you're likely to have opportunities for further development to hone the thing. Now, okay, if we do that work, we're going to make improvements. We're going to test those improvements, and the company is going to produce that physically. It starts to get into the realm of it's fair for the company to say yes, and we have an update kit, and yes, we're going to ask you to buy it from us if you want. If you don't want to, fine, because the original does work. It's just we can give you something that's even better. Then I think it's fair to sell an update kit.
Yes, yeah, and I'm gonna cut this. We went over. I wanted to do a 30-minute shot. Or
oh, I'm sorry, man.
No, it's me, man. I want to hear you talk. The more you talk, the better it is. But I'm probably going to catch you again, VOLKO, and I'm going to ask you about Zenobia, this and this and that. And I'm going to ask you a really, really heavy question is, how come I haven't had a World War II game by VOLKO Ronke? Now, I know you're going to say...
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah. Right.
Yeah. And you can play World War II by... I've done scenarios for Combat Commander. And
it's not the same thing. No, I want
you want an original, yeah. Because with my, it takes me a long time to do these things, and I only have so many years, and then I'm dead. So I want to fill in the troughs. We've got a mountain of World War II goodness to enjoy.
Oh man, look.
I have so many medieval operational stories to tell. I'm in a hurry to get to those. That's the reason why.
I guess the medievalists are very, very, very happy hearing you say that, obviously.
Yeah, but I did a lot of modern stuff too. Did a lot of insurgency, right?
Yeah.
And right now, the area that's fascinating me, in part because we don't have much of it in the hobby, is medieval operational art. Operational warfare in medieval times, through the Levy and Campaign series. There's other stuff I want to do. That's not the last thing I want to do in my life, but there's enough there to keep us going for years to come. So I don't, you don't need me to play great games of all kinds of aspects of World War II, because there's other brilliant people covering that already.
I understand. It's just another opinion, and some people will value your opinion because of the experiences of your family and you making a World War II game. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I have opinions about which World War II games are great, so I'm out there with those,
I get you. Yeah. Well, VOLKO, thanks a lot, man. It really means a lot that you did this. And again, I'm going to catch you again, and I want to talk about the Zenobia Awards with Harold.
Would love to.
And what's involved. And how come we don't hear more about this? Zenobia, that is.
Yeah, that one, that's hard to answer, but I would love to talk about it. Very exciting.
But I mean, it's not my channel that's going to bring the Zenobia to the world. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
I mean, this is an incredible project, and it's man, it's great. Anyways, VOLKO, merci beaucoup. Danke. You speak Deutsch?
Deutsch, ja.
Ja?
Ja.
Ein bisschen?
No, ein bisschen mehr als ein bisschen vielleicht.
Okay. So, again, people, thanks. There's people watching VOLKO at this time. What, nobody's got a job? Anyways. Again, thanks.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, Dan. This was great fun.
And you know what? You don't have to wait around. I'm just going to kill it, and that's it. I'm going to do my my thing. Actually, wait around, Volko. Wait around. Hold on a
All
second.
right, you kill it.
I'm gonna kill it.